Welcome to the Explainer. When it comes to massive construction projects, success often comes down to one simple thing: getting the very beginning right. Today, we're going to dive into why that initial planning phase is the first and most important domino that decides if a project succeeds or if it all comes crashing down.
And hey, this isn't a new idea. Benjamin Franklin hit the nail on the head centuries ago. But this isn't just a motivational quote you'd see on a poster. In the world of huge, complex projects, this is basically the law of gravity. Failing to prepare up front has very real and very, very expensive consequences.
And don't just take my word for it. The data is crystal clear on this. Research shows that the #1 reason projects get bogged down in disputes and legal claims is a simple failure to define the scope and goals right from the start. It's like the original sin of project management. It affects everything that comes after.
So, what happens when we commit that original sin? What does it actually look like in the real world? Let's take a look at the true price of being unprepared.
Well, when that initial planning is weak, it kicks off a chain reaction, a total domino effect. Suddenly, you've got constant changes popping up because nobody really agreed on the specifics. Those changes lead to project delays. And what do delays lead to? You guessed it, massive budget overruns. Before you know it, everyone's arguing, and in the worst-case scenario, the entire project can just fail. It's a disaster, but the crazy thing is, it's a completely predictable one. So how do we avoid this predictable disaster? Well, it all comes down to defining the project's boundaries with absolute, undeniable clarity. And the foundation for doing that is built on two key documents that are designed to work together. First up, you've got the Statement of Work, or SOW. The best way to think of this is as the project's constitution. It's the formal, contractual document that takes the owner's big-picture idea and translates it into specific, concrete things, like deliverables, schedules, and how the project will be governed. It's the official what and who. And then you have its partner, the Work Breakdown Structure, or WBS. Now, if the SOW is the constitution, the WBS is the detailed, nitty-gritty action plan. It takes that huge scope from the SOW and just chops it all up into smaller, bite-sized, manageable chunks of work that a team can actually get done. So you see how they're a perfect match, right? The SOW is the what. It's the destination you've all agreed to. The WBS is the how. It's the turn-by-turn directions to get you there. And you absolutely need both. One without the other is like having a destination with no map, or a map with no destination. It just doesn't work. Okay. So putting these tools to good use is part of a much bigger strategy. It's a whole methodology called front-end planning, and honestly, it's a real game changer. So front-end planning, FFP for short, is this super disciplined process that forces you to answer the right questions in the right order. First, in the feasibility stage, you ask the big one: should we even do this at all? If the answer is yes, you move to the concept stage. Okay, what's the best way to do this? And only after you've cleared those two gates do you get to detailed scope. That's where you build your SOW and WBS. The key part? You do all this before you commit the big money and resources. But why? Why is it so important to do all this work so early on? Seems like a lot, right? Well, the answer is visualized perfectly by a simple but incredibly powerful idea called the McClamey curve. To really get this, let's just ask a fundamental question that every project manager has to deal with. At what point in a project's life do you have the most power, the most leverage, to actually change how it all turns out? The answer, by a long shot, is right at the very beginning. Your ability to influence the project's cost, its function, its whole future is at its absolute peak on day one. As you move along and decisions get locked in, your ability to make changes just plummets. And here's the other side of that coin. At the exact same time your influence is dropping like a rock, the cost of making any change is skyrocketing. A small tweak that costs almost nothing in the planning phase can end up costing an absolute fortune once construction is underway. And that, right there, is the entire strategy of front-end planning in one sentence. It's about intentionally pushing all the hard work, the decision-making, the design debates, the tough conversations, to the very beginning. The whole point is to operate in that sweet spot where your influence is at its max and the cost of changing your mind is at rock bottom. Now, this isn't just some nice theory. Let's look at a famous, real-world example of what happens when these exact principles are totally ignored. We're talking about the massive Denver International Airport project from back in the 1990s. In project management circles, this story is legendary. It's the ultimate cautionary tale about what happens when scope definition goes catastrophically wrong. The project was an absolute mess from the start. They couldn't get the stakeholders aligned, the scope was constantly changing, and it led to that exact cascade of problems we talked about earlier. Major delays, a budget that completely exploded, and it ended up as the textbook example of how not to manage a project.
So the lesson from all this research and from cautionary tales like Denver's is pretty clear. Investing your time and your resources in good front-end planning isn't just a nice-to-have. It's not optional. It is the absolute foundation of a successful project. It's the best insurance policy you can possibly have.
So as we wrap up, I'll leave you with a question to think about for your own work. Based on everything we've just covered, what is the one single improvement you could make to the front-end planning on your very next project?